Look who's back. It's Cindy Lucin, who we haven't seen for the longest time. Hi, Cindy. And she wants to know, quoting British psychologist Robin Skinner, if overly sensitive people can't control their emotions, then they'll have to start trying to control other people's behavior. You got that right. Bill, would you agree that this is a fundamental problem with a growing segment of our societies today? Is there a cure for this basic human deficiency that plagues our species? Yeah, there's an easy cure, and that is don't tolerate it. Just don't put up with it. I'll stop chewing now. Give me 1 second. These snowflakes have turned the world into a collective nightmare for everybody, themselves included, because they never ever had a chance to experience any kind of hardships. Losing a baseball game or something. I'm not going to tread down this whole ground again and again and again, but losing a baseball game is too hard on them, apparently. And so since they never had to lose or deal with any kind of failures and everybody came in first, then they've never had to deal with hardship. And so when they're confronted with hardship, they freak out. They start to cry or do the next best thing, want to huddle up in a safe space someplace. And that's the kind of response you would expect from a 4-year-old who is stressed and maybe angry and, sad and embarrassed and all the rest of the things that come with failure and hardship and setbacks. But unfortunately, they didn't get to learn that lesson at 4, and they didn't get to learn it at 14, and they're probably not going to get to learn it at 40. So they would say, losing hurts my feelings, so let's set it up so that we never lose any sports. Okay. Then they say, geez, hearing opinions that are different than mine in college, that hurts my feelings. It causes me emotional stress. Okay, let's make sure you never hear anything new in college either. Let's make sure you go into college stupider than you were when you came out. And then they enter the workforce and they say, I would like a job where mostly I can just sit back and check my Facebook pages. And we've had a couple of good millennials here, but we've also had a couple of people who basically just come in and expect to get paid to just basically sit there. And they want raises and expect to get the company car. And when you ask them what they did to deserve this, they look at you like you're, from Mars. What do you mean, what did I do to deserve this? I came to work, right? I mean, I showed up. I am a participant, and where is my participant trophy of a new car or whatever the case may be, So, yeah, Cindy, it is it's not just a problem. It's actually the problem. I honestly think it's the problem. If I look out into the future, the 20, 30, 50-year future, as far as we can, reasonably foretell, the only problem I worry about is the quality of the people, because there's nothing out there that's a threat to this country that this country couldn't deal with very, very quickly and very effectively if we just had adults here. Our resident millennial, Eric Blake, who's smarter than the average bear, says that he was surrounded by idiots. And it's not just idiots. You're surrounded by infants as well. And infants are idiots. I've tried to reason with them, and I'm sure you have too. And you can't get them to fly an instrument approach. You can't get them to balance their checkbooks. 4 or 5-year-olds, they're just pretty much stupid as can be. So, what do you do about it? Well, we've been doing exactly the wrong thing. We just continue to give them what they want. And now there are these classes and special, courses and special instructors who go to companies and tell them how to deal with millennials. And basically what they tell the company owner is that you're going to have to do to them, for them, everything that's been done for them their entire lives, which is, in other words, make sure that they're very comfortable and happy, don't put too much of a stress on them. And to be honest with you, I've worked with enough of these people to say that they're just, it's not even that they're not worth the money. It takes me more time to do what they're supposed to be doing and look over their shoulder and make sure they're doing it than it would take me to do it myself. So, the long answer is it's going to take a while, but the short answer is you can't cheat reality. Sooner or later, they're going to be the oldest people in society. At some point, they will be. There will come a point when there will not be anybody left to take care of these 40, 50, 60-year-old children. So they are going to be in for, well, we're already seeing it. You know, Cindy, we're already seeing 30-year-old, 25, 30, 40-year-old people, 20s certainly, and they can't do laundry. And if they ever do get an apartment, they completely freak out. They don't want to drive. They forget about wanting to drive. They won't do it. Why do they need to drive? I've got Uber. I can go wherever I want to in Uber. Somebody else can drive. I don't want to put too fine a point on this, but I noticed that virtually all of the video games that are coming out now, almost all the big titles anyway, and I think this is actually extremely indicative. Almost all of them are third-person shooters, and what that means is that if you're going to play a game where let's say you're playing a soldier and you're trying to shoot other players who are playing soldiers, a first-person shooter is what the name suggests. You look out the window of the screen, and this is what you see. And as you run along, you see the ground going, and if you hold up a rifle, you can see your rifle come into frame. And older video gamers like first-person views because it gives them a sense of being in the world, and that's why they go there. But now, more and more and more of these young people are playing third-person, and third-person shooter is when you stand behind your own character. What I find especially alarming about that, which I've always hated third-person shooter, I've always hated that position, it just drives me nuts. But here's what I find interesting about that. More and more and more young people are playing this third-person game, so it's not about, hey, I think it would be cool to go into the jungle or do whatever or fly through space. That's not what's really happening. What's happening in third-person shooters is they're saying, hey, I think it would be cool to watch myself do it. Not to pretend to do it, but to watch myself doing it. And that may not sound like a big deal to you, but it is a big deal. And when you see more and more of these games where you never actually get inside the player's head, you are looking down on the player, and you can see all the cool combat moves they make, and you can watch them running over tree trunks and all the rest of that stuff, but it's not like it's happening to you. So in other words, even in computer games, they're spectators in their own lives. They're not participants in their own lives. They're spectators in their own lives. And when they go into a computer game, they would rather watch themselves doing something than to actually feel like you're doing it. Man, I don't know. Reality is postponable but not unavoidable. And the time is going to come, and it's coming, when all of the things that they should have dealt with as stresses, which are major stresses, if you're a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old, you lose a baseball game, or somebody calls you a name, or somebody threatens to beat you up after school, and all these things are stressful things to 7 or 8-year-olds. I'm not particularly threatened by any of those today, I don't think. In fact, people call me names and threaten to beat me up after school all the time, and I just pretty much don't care. But that's because when I was 7 or 8 or 9, I had to deal with it then. And then all of the teenage things that you have to deal with. You find that more and more young people all across the world they're not only not good at it, they're just not doing it. They're walking away from it. I don't know what the percentage is exactly. I want to say it's about 30-40% of Japanese males in their mid to late teens, all the way up into their 20s or 30s, and higher, I guess, have just plain abandoned anything that we would call a life. They've not just given up on it, they've given it up. They've not just gotten disappointed with the dating game and social game. They just walk away. Known miscreant Matt Lloyd points this out. He says it's actually worse than that. I was talking about third-person shooters and stuff. When I do this video game pitch, I talk about I've got 107,000, 120, maybe it's 130,000, something like that, subscribers on YouTube. Number one YouTube channel belongs to a guy named PewDiePie. PewDiePie is a Swedish guy, and and he has 66 million subscribers. And as known miscreant Matt Lloyd points out, the reason he's got so many people is because people are not even playing computer games. They're not even playing computer games, and they're not even watching themselves play computer games. They're watching somebody else play a computer game, watching himself in a world that doesn't exist. And I don't know what to say about that. It's just unbelievably appalling. But reality will not be denied. And there's going to come a point when these people are going to have to care for themselves. I think we can say with some confidence, and of course I'm generalizing, that there are mostly people in the military who are millennials, or many superb, hardworking people. Our current our office manager, operations manager is a millennial, grew up on a farm, and, and all of that. But I can't even call it laziness, although there's certainly some laziness there. They don't take the initiative, not because they're lazy. They don't take the initiative because they don't know how. They don't know how to do it. They simply sit and wait. And it's for somebody to tell them what to do. And then you tell them exactly what to do, and they'll do it. And sometimes they'll do it, okay, pretty well. But if you have to constantly be telling everybody what to do in their daily job, comes a point when you realize it's just easier and certainly cheaper for me to do this myself. And I keep coming back to the same conclusion. That's simply this. As much as I despise the whole thing and it just really angers me, they didn't do it. The millennials did not do this to themselves. They didn't decide how they were going to be raised. They're not the people that made the rules. They're not the ones who said that they can't have any stress or want to make sure that, they've got a life preserver on when they take a shower. That's not their fault. That's their parents' fault. It's just one more whole can of worms I'm about to open here. This is my personal feeling, and I know some people might disagree with this, but people talk about, oh my God, what's the word? Good Lord. I hate it when this happens. Autism. Sorry, I remembered Asperger's. I couldn't remember autism. So the number of cases of autism in society is something like 300 times what it was 20 years ago. Now, I don't believe that the environment has changed to that degree. I don't think that I certainly don't think it's things like, this whole vaccine thing or anything like that. I think that the reason that the autism rates have gone through the ceiling is because time and time and time again, I see people either ignoring children that are having a temper tantrum because it's all they do, or trying to reason with them. Some 3 or 4-year-old screaming at the top of their lungs, and mommy will crouch down there and say, look at me, look at me. Remember what we said about... No, he doesn't. He doesn't remember what we said about that. Remember how we talked? No, he doesn't remember how you talked about it. He doesn't understand the value of decency and good manners because he's 3. And this whole idea, of, well, we're going to reason with our children. We're not going to punish them or anything. My God, how could we... What kind of people would we be if we ever punished them? And so what they've done is, because they haven't punished their children, I'm not saying beat them. And I'm not saying certainly don't beat them to death. Do not administer a fatal beating to your child. That's not what I'm saying. But this idea that, well, I don't want to hurt my kid. I don't want to spank my kid. I don't want to punish my kid. And that means I'll be a better parent and he'll like me more. If you don't do that, if you continue to reason with creatures that do not have the cortical ability to reason yet, then if you don't get them disciplined in the beginning, you're not helping them. You're condemning them to a life of misery. And you see this time and time and time again. Those kids who are, and you don't see many of them anymore, but you think about my father's generation, or the people that settled the Old West, kids were left to go and fend for themselves. And if they got themselves into, fatal danger, their parents would ride in there if they could and help them just as much as they needed so that they could get, not eaten by the by the bear, and then still let them walk home or figure out a way to do it, learn something from it. And I can say that this autism epidemic is largely due to that because, as it turns out, I have a nephew who is extraordinarily autistic. I mean, really quite severely autistic. And I don't see those symptoms in many of the children that I am told are autistic, by their parents. And that sentence that just drives me insane. On the spectrum. He's on the spectrum. Really? He's on the spectrum. That means that somewhere between being a little bit emotionally unstable and not being able to communicate, sitting in a corner and just making sounds, somewhere between those two extremes is the autism spectrum. And I have heard, it's just my personal experience, but I have heard many parents say, Jordan's on the spectrum. And they say it in a very caring kind of way. But there's also a certain kind of pride there, And it's kind of, Jordan's not like the other boys. He's on the spectrum. He's a little bit, he's a little bit special. He has some special needs. Of course he does. He has special needs. That means you're a special person for having produced him, right? What a special parent you must be. And how suffering, too, put up with all this special needs kids. Here's what I think is interesting about all this, and it's gone a long way to form my opinion on it. I have friends who I know rather well, and they teach acting for children here in Los Angeles. Some of it is for people who want to condemn their kids to this life, and some kids genuinely like acting early, and there's a lot of stage moms and dads pushing them on stage. That's a catastrophe and a tragedy itself. So what's interesting is this. Time and time again, they said, 20, 30 times a year, and they've been doing it for 10 years. They will have a parent come in and say, Jordan's on the spectrum. He gets emotionally excited and upset about things. And sure enough, he's emotionally excited and upset. And he starts acting out and screaming and running around and so on. And what they said was, when the parents leave him, because they don't allow the parents to stay, all the parents have to go. When the parents leave, 2 or 3 minutes later, the kid calms down. And if he's not getting the response he wants from this temper tantrum, then he behaves himself. And they said it's like watching a switch go on and off. When the parents leave, the kid behaves more or less normally. When they come back, he starts acting up again because it works. It gets attention. Kids are not allowed to compete for anything now. And with the number of kids that are sent to daycare, where they're instead of being raised by a mom with 2 or 3 brothers, I don't mean any disrespect for people who put their kids in daycare. I understand the world is the way it is, and I'm just saying these are pretty well documented results of this. When your kid spends most of his time after school with in a room, and put aside the quality of the daycare center, let's say the person's terrific, maybe more caring and more talented than their actual parents. But if you're in a room with 30 kids and you want attention, you have to find a way to get attention. And it's not just, hey, mommy, you got to find a way to deal with mommy who's got 29 other kids to be watching. All of these things work together. And then all of the social inventions reinforce this. So I think it's got a lot to do with this whole, I think the whole thing started with the so-called self-esteem movement. And as I said, these kids didn't ask for this themselves. So if they didn't ask for this, since the kids didn't ask for the self-esteem movement, since the kids didn't ask for, we don't want to keep score at games and everybody's a winner, they didn't ask for that. Their parents gave it to them and insisted on it. And I think the reason is because their parents didn't have the emotional strength to be tough with their kids. They just didn't have the courage. And so, they're just robbed of everything. And there's something here I just saw I wanted to add to because I thought it was a really good point here. Hang on one second. So, hang on. That was one good point I really did like. I can't seem to find it. Now, I'll just say one more thing on this. Everybody knows I've been working on this Star Citizen game and stuff, and that plays to a somewhat older crowd, and that's appropriate because they're the ones who are doing most of the voting. And I'm usually in front of these things, but this is one of those things I just plain missed. I didn't hear about it until, I don't know, 3 or 4 days ago. And it's a video app. It's a mobile app called Fortnite, and I heard about it just 4 or 5 days ago because of a story about a girl in England, a 9-year-old girl who's in therapy now, under constant psychiatric care and watch, because she simply could not stop playing Fortnite. And when Dad would come to her after playing for 10 hours and say, "Honey, it's time to turn this off now," she'd get physically violent with him and start hitting him. And apparently, what it took for Dad to take action when he should have taken action a long time before. Once you say it's time for this to stop, now it's time to go to bed, they don't go to bed then, it's time for that machine to go away for a week. And if it happens again, it goes away for a month. And if it happens after that, it just goes away ever, period. But Dad finally decided that the problem was serious when he came into the room and found his daughter was playing Fortnite, and she was sitting on a cushion that was soaked in urine because she would not or could not get up from the game to go to the bathroom. So she just wet herself so she wouldn't have to leave the game. And at that point, he decided to do something. Now, Matt says that it was downloaded 24 million times in less than 24 hours. I heard about Fortnite because just for skins now, skins are like things that identify your character. You get different kind of skins, makes you a different character type or different clothes or outfits or whatever. They don't affect the play of the game. They don't much give you a big advantage. They just make your character look more unique and more personalized. Somebody said that Fortnite had made $300 million in skins, just skins, since the beginning of 2018 or something like that. Yeah, Fortnite. Now, Fortnite's an old English term. It means 2 weeks. But after I heard about this, I had to look and see what Fortnite was. So 2 million, I said 24. Anyway, 2 million in 24 hours. So I had to look at it and find out what all the fuss was about. So I saw the Fortnite trailer. And it's absolutely brilliant in the same way that a great white shark is perfectly constructed. From the looks of it, I haven't played it and I don't expect I will, but from the looks of it, it's combining a number of things that were enormously popular into kind of like this crack cocaine of video games where all of the things about one game or kind of game is combined with all of these things about another kind of game and all these things about another kind of game. So there's elements of Second Life or one of these games where you have an alternate character in an alternate universe and you meet your friends and you're this 6'4", blonde model Amazon, and you're wearing, brass bikini and so there's that whole alternate character living through your avatar aspect. It's an interesting looking shooter. So there's that whole first person, third person shooter thing. There are creatures that are somewhat like zombies, so you get your Walking Dead, doses there. But the two things I noticed about Fortnite were that in addition to all of these things and the social connections and all the rest of it, it looks like a shooter from the outside. But the two things that I recognized in Fortnite is, one of them is tower defenses appear to be built into Fortnite. Tower defense is a kind of game that's actually very fun. I got really kind of hooked on a tower defense game for 3 or 4 months. And a tower defense game works like this. There's a pathway. You're looking down from the top, basically, or from a fixed angle. And there's kind of like this little roadway, imagine. And you have a certain amount of budget in terms of points or money or whatever you want to call it. And you have to build various types of defensive things on that pathway. And it starts out easy with a smaller number of, creatures, but then they come more of them, and then they come faster, and so you have to decide, well, if I use something to slow them down here, and then I put 3 of these machine guns on this spot, I should be able to get most of them, but if some of them get through, then... So basically, it's a progressively harder game of planning in advance and laying out your defenses. And it can be very addictive. But the one thing that Fortnite has that was just immediately obvious to me is it's essentially Minecraft with guns. Now, Minecraft was absolutely enormous, and needless to say, I never got into Minecraft. I think Minecraft is, on some level, an exceedingly simple game, a simple-minded game almost. Where you basically, and the whole thing's done in blocks. It's designed to look like it's those 8-bit games like Space Invaders. And in Minecraft, you run around with a pickaxe and you start chopping up things and you get some resources. Then you build things and you build houses and you run around and chop around other things. And it's mostly building things. And so it appeals to people. And grown-ups or people with way too much time on their hands have done some amazing things. Somebody built a life-size Starship Enterprise in Minecraft. I mean, they spent a year or something on it. And they built it's true to scale. You walk up to the thing and it's just like, it's the size of 2 or 3 city blocks. So Minecraft was enormously popular back, I want to say, around 2012, 13, 14, somewhere in there. So they've taken Minecraft and mixed it with tower defense and mixed it with first-person shooters, and there's a little bit of the Candy Crush kind of thing. They've taken all of these things that work, and I don't know the details of it, but I'm sure it's one of these games where you get the app for free, but if you want extra points or extra this or that, you pay cash, and people are running up $1,000 bills for these things. And there you go. A good question, Eric. It's Enterprise. I think it might have been Enterprise D. Anyway. Now, this particular game is an intentional perfect storm of all of these addictive qualities, and I admire the developers, certainly from a business sense. I suspect they knew what they were doing in terms of what this effect would be. But we're still in very, very early stages of this. But it feels to me, listening to what I'm hearing about Fortnite, I feel like a cop in the late 80s in inner city when somebody mentioned something called crack cocaine. What the hell's crack cocaine? It's cocaine and it's dirt cheap and you don't have to freebase it and you don't have to sniff it. It's just a rock and you smoke it in a pipe and it's a tremendously powerful hit. Really? Yeah. And I feel like one of those cops who've heard about this crack cocaine thing and starting to see just a few outlying cases of it. And I often think about this and think, this could be very, very bad because it appears to be an intentionally refined super nicotine, weapons grade nicotine. And these kids have enough problems staying in the real world as it is. But Cindy, the answer is what do we do about it is we stop tolerating it. And the sooner we stop tolerating it, the better it'll be for us and the better it'll be for them too. They've got a world of growing up to do, and many of them won't. They won't. It's too late. In many cases, they simply don't have the emotional substrata that adult people have, and it's a catastrophe, and it's going to get a lot worse. And we're going to see it. It worries the daylights out of me.